Hey everybody, it's Kurt here with the InternetTimeMachine.com, and we are sitting on a monster niche that you don't know about. The reason you don't know about this is because you most likely live in America and you're watching this video. Now what if I told you there is a huge fantasy niche taking off that needs support and it has nothing to do with America? Now I know what you're thinking, Kurt, I have plenty of fantasies and they don't involve you. Well, not that kind of fantasy, but think fantasy football, fantasy baseball, fantasy basketball. These are the electronic leagues developed to follow the pro leagues where you can draft players and compete against your friends forming a team. What if I told you there's a fantasy demand for a certain sports league with very little supply out there? It's like being at the very beginning of fantasy football or baseball. And what that is, I'm going to show you now on the Internet Time Machine, is fantasy rugby. This is something we've been tracking worldwide and it's starting to really take off. Now, I know about as much about rugby as Matt Damon did when Clint Eastwood called him with the script for Invictus. So don't feel bad if you just said, I have no idea what to do here. I'm going to walk you over to the Internet Time Machine, show you the stats and the trends, and then I'm going to put a posting up in our forum for international people and people from the US that want to team up on a product to become an authority site in the fantasy rugby area. So let's head over to the Internet Time Machine. I'll show you what we're looking at. And then if you want, you can post something in the forum. You don't have to be a member of the Internet Time Machine. You just have to register in the forum. It's free if you want to team up on a product. Now, if you already have an Internet Time Machine membership, I'm going to show you in the membership video what countries fantasy rugby is absolutely exploding in, how there's zero PPC and almost no organic competition, and how quickly and easily you could build a list of 5,000 or 10,000 people interested in fantasy rugby. So let's head over to the Internet Time Machine and take a look at this new trend that is non-US based. Let's go. Okay, so we are looking live at the Internet Time Machine user interface, and what we have here is 3 different sections. Most recent mentions of subjects from around the world for the last 24 hours, potential trends starting in the last 24 hours, and then our long-term trends. And you'll actually see that Fantasy Rugby League is actually a long-term trend that's now broken into the top 10 of possibilities of high demand and low supply. You'll see actually as we come down, number 3 is gene therapy history. A lot of people looking for that. Credit cards with low interest rates are surging right now. Katrina Kaif video, Watt Pomp lyrics, again, subjects that are taking off in demand, yet not much supply. And here we have at number 9, Fantasy Rugby League. Now, if I click on Google, I'll notice there's about 2.6 million results, and there are fantasy leagues out there, so don't worry, you don't need to get the computer team out and create a fantasy league adapter. ESPN runs one, Fox Sports. But if you look, you'll notice an eZine article is ranking top 5 for Google, and that's in America. And then Fantasy League is the only PPC ad for it, and this is for actually a basketball league. So there's actually no competition for PPC, and an eZine article is ranking number 5. So that's pretty impressive opening. So let's take a look. Actually, let's fire up our complimentary softwares you get as an Internet Time Machine member. We're going to go into SandGen because I want to create a free report for fantasy rugby. So I'm just going to type in rugby, see if we get some fantasy results. And this is going to create my free report and my opt-in page to start building a list. And then I'm going to bring up SEPCON, which I'd like to scan the internet for, let's see, rugby sites that I could possibly contact to put advertisement on or to JV with or to maybe team up on an informational product. Maybe there's people that want to write articles for my fantasy rugby site to be an authority site. And we'll go into YouTube and look for any videos. This is our Tube Samurai. Videos having to do with rugby. And we'll search there. So let's go over also then to Google Trends. Take a look. Here is the Google trend for fantasy rugby. You can see it spikes very high at the beginning of the season and then comes down lower. So what I'm going to show you on the membership side video is break this down by country and show you how popular this is all countries together, but look at, if rugby fantasy is at 1.0, look at the spikes you get up to almost 7s and 8s at the beginning of rugby season for this term rugby fantasy. So huge demand, and I'm going to show you how it compares to fantasy baseball and basketball on the membership side and what countries you can set up your PPC campaigns for to absolutely start building a monster list. And if I look at the keyword tool that Google gives us. I'm going to do a search for Fantasy Rugby League. Let's do that first. Show you how wide open this is. You'll see that we have a cost per click of 46 cents for Fantasy League Rugby. Rugby League itself is at 64 cents, but that's way too general. Fantasy Rugby League down here, it's claiming has 0 PPC. Rugby Betting League is 156. That's betting. But watch when you do this. Fantasy Rugby. Take out the league. Just do Fantasy Rugby, like fantasy football, fantasy baseball. Almost 15,000 global searches. Cost per click 59 cents. Guinness Fantasy Rugby. They run a fantasy site, the Guinness Beer Maker, 5 cents. Fantasy Rugby League, 45 cents. Six Nations looks like a rugby tournament coming up. So that's going to be high for ticket prices. But look at this. Six Nation 2010 tickets are only 5 cents. Here you come down to 5 cents. Fantasy Rugby Six Nations, 5 cents. And Fantasy Rugby Union, again, you get some lower search terms, but all at 5 cents. So I'm going to put a post up on the forum for anyone around the world that wants to team up on a fantasy rugby site. Again, you don't need to create the actual software that runs it. That's already out there. But you can create an authoritative site and build a huge list of rugby fans. It's like being the first person to have a fantasy baseball or fantasy basketball. The amount of page views you'd get by people who follow fantasy rugby, the advertising space you could sell, and even the AdSense would be amazing. So head over to the membership side. I'm going to show you the countries that are the most demanding with low supply that you could set up the PPC campaigns. And actually, let's know what I'll show you how. Let's see how our SandGen is done. So let's see, learning rugby. Say we want to create a free report, learning rugby, and maybe fantasy rugby. There's a great one. That's our subject. And what else do we have for rugby? Learning rugby. Found a lot of articles on rugby. Not a ton on fantasy. That tells you how wide open it is. So, rugby kits, go catwalk. Here's something about the Six Nations. So let's create a free report. We're just going to save this on the desktop as a rugby. And then let's create our opt-in page as well. And that is going to be on our desktop as well. And we're going to call it about rugby B1. Alright, so what did we just create? Let's check the desktop. Oops, I didn't even finish my I gotta create my opt-in page. So fantasy rugby tips. That'll be our header page. Now it creates it. Let's take a look. Here is our free rugby report we can send people. It comes out in Word. It is author cited, and you can do whether you can make it a PDF, add graphics. There's a fantasy rugby article by M.A. Williams, as well as Six Nations Rugby about the tournament coming up. So here's your free report, and here is your opt-in page created by our software. Fantasy Rugby Tips. This free report includes these 3 articles. You can tie it in. And Tube Samurai has found, what are we up to here? 50 sites. Oh, I'm sorry, this is 50 YouTube videos having to do with rugby that I could go in and either select a few authors and subscribe to them, send invites, direct message them, and they have a lot of views. It sorts it by views. And we can go into SEPCON and realize we are up to over 211 contact pages on websites having to do with rugby, and we have over 18 emails that we could contact offering a JV opportunity, or we're starting a new rugby site, would you like to be involved? So this is these 3 softwares are free to gold and platinum members at theinternettimemachine.com, as well as our Internet Time Machine software. And I'm going to do a membership video now, again going over the countries and how to set this all up. Talk to you later.